Causes of the war between Russia and Ukraine, the roots of the conflict and its developments. Washington has always worked to fuel conflict and conspiracies in Eastern Europe, specifically Ukraine, in order to dismantle the Russian Federation. Reasons for the dispute between Russia and Ukraine. 1. Washington has worked to attract the Ukrainian elite, with financial support and weapons for the Ukrainian army, since its secession from Russia in December 1991. U.S. intelligence trained Ukrainian militias loyal to Washington and working to link with the European Union and NATO. At the same time, radical nationalism emerged, seeking to eliminate anyone who spoke the Russian language. The conflict flared up between everyone who was Ukrainian and Russian inside Ukrainian territory, and even outside it, and the American West became the destination of the Ukrainian people, and hatred for everyone who was Russian intensified. The Ukrainians began torturing and fighting the Russian communities in eastern Ukraine until they reached the island of Crimea, which has a Russian majority. 2. At that time, the Russian economy was suffering from many problems, and the Russian country was preoccupied with the war in Chechnya, which was exhausting it greatly. 3. In 1997, Russia was forced, under pressure from Washington and the European Union, to recognize the borders of Ukraine, including the Crimean Peninsula, which is inhabited by the Russian majority. For then Moscow and Kiev witnessed the first major diplomatic crisis between them during the era of Vladimir Putin. In the fall of 2003, Russia suddenly began building a dam in the Kerch Strait towards the Ukrainian island of Kosatasla, and Kiev considered this an attempt to redraw new borders between the two countries. The intensity of the conflict increased, and it was not put to an end until a bilateral meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian presidents. After that, the construction of the dam was stopped, but the declared friendship between the two countries began to show cracks. 5. During the presidential elections in Ukraine in 2004, Russia greatly supported the candidate close to it, Viktor Yanukovych, but the Orange Revolution, which was supported and financed by the United States of America, Britain and France, prevented his victory, and a politician close to the European American West, Viktor Yushchenko, won instead. During his presidential term, Washington and London blatantly interfered in Ukrainian internal affairs, and began inciting the new Ukrainian president against Putin and the Russian Federation, which led to the exacerbation of the conflict. Ukraine demanded to join the European Union and NATO. Accordingly, Russia cut off gas supplies to the country twice from Ukraine, in 2006 and 2009. Russia also cut off gas supplies to Europe passing through Ukraine. 6. In 2008, the then U.S. President, George W. Bush, tried to integrate Ukraine and Georgia into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and accept their membership in the NATO alliance through a preparatory program. The aim of this was to put more pressure on Russia with the aim of dismantling it, as Washington had done before in the Soviet Union in 1990. But this time, this was met with protest by Russian President Putin, and accordingly Moscow clearly announced that it would not accept Ukraine becoming a member of NATO and posing any threat to Moscow's security. France and Germany also prevented Bush from implementing his plan, and during the NATO summit in Bucharest, the issue of Ukraine and Georgia's membership in NATO was raised, and Washington was responsible for that, but no date was set for that. Because the issue of Ukraine joining NATO did not succeed quickly, Ukraine tried, under pressure from Washington, to work on linking Ukraine with Western Europe and America through a cooperation agreement with the European Union in the summer of 2013. Against this background, the government of former Ukrainian President Yanukovych froze the cooperation agreement with the European Union, and as a result, protests began opposing the decision by Ukrainians loyal to America and the European Union. This led Yanukovych to flee to Russia in February 2014. It is noteworthy that Yanukovych won the elections in 2010 and is a Russian separatist in eastern Ukraine. The outbreak of the Russian-Ukrainian crisis. Annexation of Crimea to Russia. Washington funded the Ukrainian neo-Nazis in eastern and southern Ukraine and inside the Crimean Peninsula against everyone who speaks Russian. The American intelligence trained the Ukrainian neo-Nazis to carry out genocide against everyone who was Russian or speaks Russian. The neo-Nazis expanded their operations of ethnic cleansing and killed Russians wherever they were found. Annexation of Crimea. As a result, Russia annexed the island of Crimea in March 2014, and this was a milestone and the beginning of an undeclared war between the Russian